Conversation. I'm your host, Steve Iverson. A few weeks ago, my wife and I attended a car and air show at a small airport in Stowe, Massachusetts. And there was a small airplane there with a man who was letting people, mostly kids, climb in and out of the cockpit. And he was answering a lot of questions and doing a nice job explaining things to people. So we hung around and discovered that he had actually built the airplane himself. He'd bought plans, a bunch of aluminum, some parts, and had built the whole thing over the course of a little over 5 years. So I found this story so interesting that I asked him if he'd come on our show and talk about it, what's required to build a plane like that, what it's like flying it. So we're pleased to have Mike Smith here today on the show. Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, what made you think I'm going to build my own airplane?
It didn't start out that way. Like a lot of kids that were interested somehow in aviation when I was younger, I built model rockets and little U-control airplanes, one that go around in circles on the end of a line, and I just always enjoyed that.
Yeah. Model rockets were big when we were kids.
They were big. And my father used to do a little bit of skydiving out in Orange, Mass, actually, many, many years ago. And I always thought that was the coolest thing. And he always said, when you're 18, I'll take you skydiving. Well, he didn't get that opportunity, but as soon as I got to college and found out they had a skydiving club, I joined that and started skydiving. So I spent a lot of years skydiving and kept saying, when I stop spending so much money on skydiving, I've definitely got to learn to fly an airplane. So it came to a point where I said, okay, I'm ready to get my pilot's license. And the fun thing was that I went with my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, on a Friday after work with a friend of mine. He said, hey, we're going to go fly over to Nantucket Island and have some dinner. And I'm like, that sounds like fun.
That sounds like a fun trip.
So we got in the airplane, we flew over to Nantucket, we landed, we got a cab, we went into town, we had dinner, we came back, we flew back. It was a gorgeous night out, a beautiful moon, clear skies. And we got back to the mainland, and I landed, and I just said, I feel like a rock star. I just flew to Nantucket, had dinner, and came back. So 2 weeks later, I was taking flight lessons, and a little more than a year later, I got my license and started to fly, and just really loved it. But I was renting airplanes the whole time out of Hanscom, and airplanes tend to be expensive items, and that means that the cost of renting an airplane is likewise high. And after a time, I just started figuring, I said, boy, if I'm going to keep doing this, I got to find a way to make it more cost effective, because most pilots do not have a wad of cash. They're not high rollers. They're just they're choosing to spend their money on flying instead of other things.
Oh, that's interesting. I always assumed that they were pretty well off. I'm glad you said that. I learned something new there.
Yeah, if you go out to the airport and you talk to most of the pilots, they are making life choices and giving up certain things in order to have the money to fly.
Okay.
And I figured if I was going to fly more, keep flying, I had to find a more cost-effective way of doing it. And started to kind of think about what it would be to build an airplane. And you're spending money on materials, but all the labor is just you. You're not paying for labor. But after that, the important thing with experimental amateur-built aircraft, which is what I have, is that you are the maintainer. You're the mechanic. And that really helps reduce the cost because in a certificated airplane, that's an airplane that's not, that's built by Cessna or Beechcraft or one of the big names. It's gone through a whole certification process to make sure it behaves in a certain way. All of that costs money to certify them, to build them, to maintain them to FAA standards, Federal Aviation Administration. And it just gets expensive. And if you're doing your own maintenance, then that means you're just paying for parts and not for the labor. And as an experimental amateur-built aircraft, nothing on the airplane has to be a certificated piece of equipment, whereas on a Cessna, you can't just take any screw. you have to have a screw that has a part number to it that the FAA has approved.
I see.
And that screw may be the exact same screw that you're using somewhere else that costs 50 cents, but because it's been through a certification process and it has a paper trail, that thing may cost $4.
So any plane you build yourself is technically considered experimental, and the understanding is you accept all the risk. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Any airplane that you home build, whether it's from a kit or whether you scratch build it all yourself from plans, is forever called an experimental aircraft.
Okay.
It never changes. There's no way to change that. And if the airplane has more than one seat so that you can take a passenger, then you have to have somewhere in the process of getting in the airplane a very large thing that says experimental.
I noticed that right on the wing on yours.
Right. On mine, I chose to put it right there on the wing. Some people put it on the upholstery inside. And that's to try to let somebody from the general public who doesn't really know much about airplanes understand that they're getting into an airplane that has not been certified, through a process through the FAA.
Okay.
So,
Do they tend to be overall as safe as an airplane you purchase, or do they crash more often?
they are nearly as safe as a certificated airplane. The difference is that because most pilots, when they build an airplane, you can have somebody else test fly the airplane, but most pilots they built it, they want to fly it. And most of the accidents that happen in experimental aircraft tend to happen in the first several hours of flight time because they're inexperienced in the aircraft type, or they have made some mistake in the fuel system or something like that. The engine stops. Now, airplanes don't stop flying when the engine stops, but they certainly stop going up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a higher risk of something going wrong especially during those first hours when you're kind of shaking things out. A certificated airplane are all built the same, identical, and there's a test flight. Chances are, 99.9% of the time it's going to work as advertised. The experimental, you're allowed to vary from the plans. You're allowed to do whatever you want. You can look at something and go, I got a better way to do that. And sometimes it's not a better way to do that.
And you don't really find out until you take off and fly up in the air.
Yeah, so people always ask me, they say, well, does somebody have to inspect the airplane before you fly it? And the answer is yes. You can either have somebody from the FAA do it, or somebody that the FAA designates, a designated airworthiness inspector. They'll help you with all the paperwork, and they will look over the airplane. They'll look at everything that they can look at. So they can look at all the things they can see, but of course they can't see inside the wing, and they can't see inside the tail, and they can't climb in the back tail of the aircraft. So they're still counting on the fact that you have built it and done it according to accepted construction practices. They'll see anything that they can see and tell you if you need to fix something, change something. But after that, it's up to you to go prove that it flies.
So you're the owner, the manufacturer, the mechanic, the inspector, and the pilot, all those things.
Yep. In fact, the manufacturer on you have to have a little data plate on the back tail, and the manufacturer is listed as my name.
Oh.
So
you got a set of plans somewhere, bought a bunch of materials, and just worked endless weekends in your basement?
More or less.
For years.
For lots of different aircraft types, you can buy a kit, which they send you all the parts. Some of them are fabricated, some of them are partly fabricated, and you have to finish. At the time, I didn't have the money to buy a kit. I had just started a business, but I still really wanted to build, so I just bought a set of plans from the company. So they offered a kit, or they offered the plans. I bought the plans, got them, went, what did I get myself into?
I bet it's intimidating when you look at it.
It's very intimidating. And then, like you said, I just started to buy the raw materials, the raw aluminum that's specified in the drawings. And for the first year, I did nothing but make parts. I didn't even put two parts together. Just made parts, put them in a bin. And after about a year, I built all of the inexpensive stuff, and now I have to start putting things together. And it truly is like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. You've got to just flip a page, do what's on the page, flip the page, do what's on the next page, and don't worry about how much stuff you still have to do. So 5 years, 3 months, 2,360 hours.
And you even had to more or less build the engine, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you can buy an engine that's
Yeah.
fully assembled, and there's several engines that are available for the aircraft I have. It's called a Sonex, Sonex. But the engine that I chose, which was again the inexpensive option, is basically a Volkswagen Bug engine.
Oh,
So they still make the cores. You don't get it from the junkyard. You buy the engine case. It comes from Brazil, and then all of the parts come in the kit. So they send you all the parts to make an engine, and they say, here's the instructions, here's the video, go to it.
so the engine in particular is a kit. You
So the engine
you
was
get
a
all
kit
the
also.
parts,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you
And that's an
assemble.
anomaly. The vast majority of engines come completely assembled, pre-run,
Okay.
and you put it on, hook it up, and it runs. This one, in order to help keep the cost down, it comes as a kit,
Okay.
which actually has been kind of nice because if I'm the mechanic and something goes wrong, I'm intimately familiar with the engine. I've built it from scratch, and I've had to do things to it where I had to take it apart and put it back together again,
Yeah.
and it's kind of old hat.
And if you just bought the engine, there'd be a first time when you take it apart, and you'd be learning sort of
Yeah, and
a
I
little
think
late in the game. in a
yeah, and I
way.
think most people would be hesitant to take apart an engine that they didn't build. They'd find somebody else who knows about something
Yeah.
about that engine and say, here, you do it. But now you're back to paying somebody else
Yeah,
to do the work.
definitely raises cost.
Yeah, definitely raises costs.
Yeah. And so finally, it's done, and I believe you had to take it out of your basement in sections.
Yeah,
The
so-
wings are separate from the fuselage. and-
Right. So fortunately, I wanted an airplane that I could build in my basement, and obviously you can't put the wings on and then get out of your basement. But
Yeah.
the wings come off on this particular aircraft for transport, and my basement walks out into my garage because we live on a hill. So when I got the fuselage, the tail, and the engine done, and it was time to move it out, I just took my 3-foot door that went to the garage and made it into a 6-foot door.
Oh,
And then I had a whole bunch of people come and help me lift up the airplane, and the tail wouldn't go out the door until we turned it 45 degrees, so we all lifted up the airplane. We turned it 45 degrees, we got it out. Did a little work in my garage for about a month, and then took it to the airport and spent about a month putting the wings on and doing all the final.
the final assembly was actually at the airport.
Yeah, because
okay.
it's it took me about a month. Getting the wings on was in one day, but then there's just all the other minutia of stuff that you have to hook up and check and troubleshoot. And now that you've put it all together,
Yeah.
so
So, and then you take it for a first flight, and how frightened were you?
well, not
Maybe you weren't at all.
not-
I'm imagining myself in that position.
not frightened, but
Yeah.
definitely was thinking about it. It's it's a little nerve-wracking, because first of all that you've built it, you've got nobody to blame but yourself if it doesn't work properly, and I have a wife and a daughter, and obviously concerned for them.
Yeah.
So it was a little nerve-wracking, and I did what a lot of pilots do when they fly their airplane for the first time: is you take off, you fly around in the pattern, you land, and you're done for the day.
That's enough.
It was just like, whew, I did it. It worked. I'm on the ground.
Right.
Let's not tempt fate twice in one day.
Right.
Which is actually a good thing to do anyway, because at that point you want to pull the cowl off and check the engine and check for leaks and anything else
Yeah.
before you go up and fly again. But yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking.
I would think so. I mean, I'd have to go lie down for a bit after that. I think we even have some video of the first flight. So this is the very first flight in 2014.
Yeah, so this is the Minuteman Airport in Stowe, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And there I am just taking off for the first time.
There it
And
goes.
my wife was in the background just giddy, going like, it worked, it worked.
Your daughter wasn't there that day?
My daughter was there too.
Oh, she was? Oh, okay.
So my daughter's 14 now. That
Okay.
was 4.5 years ago. So
Yeah.
I think my daughter was more concerned than anybody
Oh.
about my first flight.
Yeah.
She was the one that was most worried. But
Yeah.
taking off in an airplane is pretty simple.
Okay.
It's not the difficult part of flying. The challenging part of flying is often landing. And in fact, you don't see it on here, but my first landing wasn't so hot.
Oh.
So I just pushed the throttle up, powered up, took off, flew around the pattern again, came back, and then my landing here, the second one was a greaser, just slid right on like it was supposed to.
Yeah, that's good.
So Yeah, a lot of piloting is good decision making, and if you're not having a good landing, you got an engine, just push the throttle up, go around, try it again.
That actually happened on a commercial flight I was on once. They were almost landed, and they just went back up
Doing a
in the
go
sky
around,
and
yeah.
flew around and came down.
Yep.
Came down again. Boy, that's a neat,
Yeah, and then
a neat
you'll
thing.
see there's my daughter who came
yeah.
right over, and she's just like, ah, she was so excited.
There must have been a ton of excitement there.
Yeah, yeah, and most people when they make their first flight, you don't have a big audience. You
Yeah.
don't want a lot of people there. You don't want the pressure of if you're doing checks on your aircraft and switches and all of a sudden and something isn't quite right. You don't want to feel the pressure of like, well, everybody's here. I don't want to disappoint them. I'm going to go anyway.
Right.
You want to just be able to go, no, not quite right. Let me shut down, check it out, and if you have to go do it on another day, then fine.
You can always
So there
invite
was my
people
wife, my
later.
daughter, and 2 other people.
Oh, okay.
That was it.
Yeah, yeah. And the folks at the airport.
And the folks at the airport. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a small airport.
It's a small airport. Although we've got now 75-ish, I think, based airplanes there.
Oh.
Some are tied down outside. Some are in hangars. The Marlborough Airport is in the process of shutting down, so we got a lot of people from there. But the nice thing about the Minuteman Airport is Don McPherson, the owner, is just so keyed into the community. He's really trying to keep the community active and involved in the airport, let them know what we're doing, try to be good neighbors. He has sheep that graze on the property there. There's people that raise vegetables. He's got beehives there. The beekeepers keep beehives.
I think I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, they're just really trying to be friendly with the environment and the neighbors, because so many times, especially small airports, airplanes are just seen as a noisy nuisance, and so the neighbors are not very happy with us sometimes. Yeah. And unfortunately, those are often the neighbors that moved there 20 years after it was an airport, so they should have known. But still, we do noise abatement procedures, which means that if we know there's certain houses over here, we try to make sure that when we take off that we're turning away from those, that we can throttle back the engine so there's less noise. Anything we can do to keep our neighbors happy with us.
And they host these nice car and airplane shows where people can go in and look around and just sort of enjoy looking at things. And
Wings and Wheels.
Wings and Wheels, right,
Yeah.
Thank you. And I imagine some of the neighbors come by, and it makes them more in touch with what's going on.
Yeah,
and
very much
perhaps
so.
receptive to it.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you experienced out at the airport was the Young Eagles. There's the Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA, which I'm the president of the Stowe chapter.
Yeah.
And we regularly, from April through November, second Saturday of the month, we fly kids for free. So from 9 to noon on those days, we just invite the kids to come out, 8 to 17, and we give them free flight. So the pilots are just donating their time and their gas and their aircraft to just take kids out and have them experience aviation. And some kids are happy to just sit there and watch or sit in the back. Others really would like to fly the airplane, and we just, once we get off the ground, we kind of give them the controls and tell them what to do and say, okay, you're flying.
Wow.
And so we have a lot of repeat offenders, kids that keep coming back out because they just had such a great time.
And probably enthusiasts and future pilots as well.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you look at the demographic of pilots right now, they all look like me. Gray hair, beards, older. It's kind of an expensive hobby to get into initially, especially, and it's been tough to pull in young people to that as a hobby and then as a profession. So anything we can do to build that up, and it's just so much fun to be up there with the kids and just to see them, experience everything. The big smiles, and when they realize that they can control the airplane, it's like you can go up, you can go down, you can go left, you can go right, and they're afraid at first to touch the controls, and then once they see how easy it is, then you just sit there and tell them, okay, right turn, left turn, okay, nose down a little bit, nose up a little bit. Yep, you're doing great. Where do you want to go? Go there.
That's an important experience, I think, especially today where people, especially kids, I think, spend a lot of time just looking at screens, computers, tablets, phones, and to be up in an airplane, actually flying, is such a different experience and must be awfully valuable.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the few times where you do see the kids actually forget that they have a phone. You know, that it's in the map pocket on the side, and I have to remind them, hey, do you want to take a selfie? Oh yeah, and then they take it out and they take some pictures. But yeah, fortunately they're looking out the cockpit, out the canopy, and looking around and trying to find their house or things that they recognize, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Now you also have some videos. You've got a YouTube channel. I thought it was just going to be like this until suddenly you were upside down. Here we go.
Yeah, I purposely wanted to build an airplane that could do at least the mild aerobatics, just because that was something that always interested me. They haven't made an amusement park ride yet that can make me sick, so.
Okay.
So this aircraft is stressed for +6 and -3 Gs, you know, times the force of gravity.
Okay.
And the most I'll get up to is maybe 4 or a little over 4 Gs, but most things are, most of the stuff that I do is actually 1 G. So like when you do a loop or you do a roll, as you go through there, you're sitting in your seat all the way around, just as if you were sitting here like this.
Okay.
So you're not like falling out of your seat or getting tossed around. A true aerobatic airplane has a system that has inverted fuel and oil, which means that when the airplane's upside down, if you can imagine in a car, you're always with the wheels on the ground.
Ideally.
Yeah, ideally on the ground. And so the fuel always is able to run by gravity to the engine.
Yeah.
In an airplane, once you get upside down, now all of a sudden gravity is pulling the fuel and the oil to the opposite side of the fuel tank and the engine.
Yeah.
And so now you starve the engine of both oil and of fuel.
Yeah.
So when most of the aerobatics I do are such that you're still putting positive Gs on the aircraft, so the fuel and the oil keep flowing normally. But when you see the aerobatic pilots at air shows and whatnot, and the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, and they get upside down and they're flying for extended periods of time, it's because they have a fuel tank and an oil system that allows the airplane to stay inverted for long periods of time, and the fuel and the oil will keep going.
And I imagine that affects the engine too. Can an engine like that run in any position, or is it designed to only run with the bottom down?
Yeah, interestingly, over time for various vehicles, cars, airplanes, everything, and even cars, you know, there are cars where the engines are actually mounted vertically. And then others where it's horizontals, others where it's on its side. So the engine doesn't really care. Just the fuel system cares about how it's getting dragged in there. So yeah, it runs just fine in any attitude. But yeah, I really enjoy doing aerobatics. It's just very three-dimensional. Kind of go anywhere, do anything.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I did take lessons. I took aerobatic lessons.
Oh, there's actually lessons just for that.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
I thought maybe once you got your pilot's license, you just started experimenting a little bit, but this
could.
Is something else.
You're free to, but you know, common sense kind of dictates that if you're going to do something like that, it's good to get some training. So I did take aerobatic lessons.
Oh, okay.
And then took those lessons and transferred them over to working in my airplane.
How widespread is this? How many people build their own planes? We've just got a couple of minutes left here, but I'm curious about that.
Well, interestingly, right now there are more experimental aircraft being built every year than there are certificated small airplanes being produced.
Really?
Vans Aircraft, that's the name of a company that sells kits. They're the most popular kit airplane in the world. Fantastic airplanes. They've just had their 10,000th flying aircraft. So there are still lots of kits out there that are being built, but they've had 10,000 of them that have actually been built and flown. And I know I'm going to get the number wrong, but the number of experimental aircraft on the U.S. registry is, 100,000 or something like that. And I'm sure I have that number wrong, but
I had no idea.
Quite a few.
I had no idea. Yeah. And what's the broad price range for a finished airplane that someone might build themselves, from the absolute cheapest to the high end?
Well, what's the stock answer? It varies.
It varies.
So my aircraft, keeping things pretty on the cheap, I spent about $28,000, and that was for the entire airframe, the engine, all the avionics, the instruments inside, paint, etc. Another friend of mine also built from a kit the exact same airplane, and he was able to scrounge around and get deals, and he built his for about $16,000.
Oh, wow.
But some of the higher end aircraft, like some of the Vans aircraft and some other even much more high performance composite aircraft with big engines, you can still easily spend $200,000 building an the airplane of your dreams. So I wouldn't say that there's an average, but since Vans is the most popular type of aircraft, they're probably going to be in the range of $40,000 to $120,000, depending on which one you build and what kind of fancy avionics and whatnot you put in it.
And you spread the cost out over the time you spend building it, so
Right.
that's 5 years plus or minus, and
Right.
that helps budget it, I would think.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there a point in the construction where suddenly you realize I've got to bite the bullet and buy all the most important stuff? This is where it's expensive now?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was the sort of the point of building from scratch, was I knew that the aluminum was cheap and I could just kind of build inexpensive parts for a while. And then it got to the wing spars, the structural spars for the wings. That was sort of the next expensive thing. And then the engine was another expensive. The engine was about $7,000, which is pretty darn cheap for an engine. But and then all the avionics, the instruments in there, that was probably another $4,000, $5,000. So, but fortunately by then I'd had my business for a while. We were doing better. I had some money, which was what I was counting on.
Sure.
I was counting on that happening. I built in a little over 5 years. There's plenty of people that are on the 10-year and 15-year plan, for either financial reasons or it's just hard to, get in the shop every day and do some work. So
Did you have to work on it pretty much every weekend?
I tried to work on it every day, at least something. And
Yeah.
sometimes that meant just going to the shop and cleaning up or looking at the plans and figuring out what I'm going to do the next day. But I spent an average of 500 hours a year, which meant that I spent an average of about 10 hours a week. And my wife and my daughter would go to bed at night, and then I would work until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So the nice thing, and I didn't work on weekends, so I tried to make sure that it never interfered with family time.
Oh, I see. So you actually did not build on weekends,
I
only
didn't.
on weekdays.
Yeah, if on the weekends, if I did, again, it would just be at night. But I tried to refrain from having my aircraft building go over my family time. Cause,
That's smart.
yeah, and you got to have your spouse and your family on your side to do a project like this.
I would think so.
keep
So you've got to
them
keep
keep them
everybody on
happy.
board. Well, I guess we should wrap up, but if someone is watching the show and is interested in looking into building one themselves, is there a particular organization or company website or something
Yeah,
that you'd recommend?
EAA.org, so Experimental Aircraft Association.org, has a plethora of information on there. I'm on YouTube, and certainly somebody can drop a message to me on YouTube.
Yep.
Kit Aircraft, there's a whole bunch of magazines. Kit Planes is a magazine that's, if anybody has any interest, get a copy of that. You'll start to learn a lot.
Okay.
But EAA, that's the best place to go.
Fantastic. And if somebody would like to come see your plane and chat with you, will they be doing the shows again next year at the Minuteman Airport in
Yep.
Stowe?
Yep, so we'll be doing Wings and Wheels again,
Okay.
and we'll be doing Young Eagles April through November. But you don't even have to wait for those things. Come out to the airport and find a pilot. They'll be like me. You'll have trouble shutting them up. They want to talk about airplanes and flying, and they just really love it. So.
Well, it's nice to know. Well, fantastic. I really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about how this is done. And I can't say I do it myself probably, but I admire people who do. And I hope people come and find you at the airport sometime and talk to you, because you're an evangelist for this hobby.
Certainly am.
And I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I
You bet.
appreciate it.
You bet. So you've been watching In Conversation, and our host again has been Mike Smith, who built his own airplane. Thanks for watching.